farmhouse wasn't just old, it felt ancient, like it had grown out of the Illinois soil itself. My parents bought it as a fixer-upper, a charming escape from city life. For me, a 17-year-old, it was just an isolating pit of boredom. The nearest town was a 20-minute drive, and the only other house for miles was a dilapidated shack, half swallowed by an overgrown cornfield. My parents loved the rustic feel, the creaks and groans the house made at night. To them, it was character. To me, it was unsettling. My first few weeks were a tedious blur of unpacking and cleaning. My bedroom was on the second floor, a large, airy room with a window overlooking the vast, empty fields. It also had a second door, small and wooden, set awkwardly into the far wall. It was painted shut, and the knob was a strange, tarnished brass thing that didn't turn. My dad said it probably led to some old storage crawl space, and promised he'd pry it open for me eventually. I didn't care. It was just another weird quirk of a weird house. The nights were the worst. The silence out there wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, suffocating. Every scrape of a branch against the siding, every gust of wind whistling through a loose window frame, sounded amplified, intentional. One night I was jolted awake by a sound, not a creak or a groan, but something distinct. Scrape, scrape, scrape. It was coming from the little wooden door. I sat bolt upright, my heart hammering against my ribs. My eyes were locked on the door, barely visible in the sliver of moonlight cutting through my window. Scrape, scrape, scrape. It sounded like fingernails dragging slowly down the wood. My mind raced, trying to find a logical explanation. A rat? No, the sound was too rhythmic, too deliberate. I held my breath, listening. Silence. A minute passed, then another. My heart rate slowly returned to something resembling normal. I convinced myself I'd been dreaming, a stress-induced nightmare from the move. I finally lay back down, pulling the covers up to my chin, but sleep didn't come easily. The next night it happened again. This time the scraping was followed by a soft thump, like something had bumped against it from the other side. My blood ran cold. I wasn't dreaming. I grabbed my phone, my fingers shaking as I turned on the flashlight, pointing the beam at the door. It was unchanged. The thick layers of white paint were still sealed tight. But as my light traced the frame, I saw something that made my breath catch in my throat. On the floor, right at the base of the door, was a small pile of fresh wood shavings and flecks of white paint. Something was trying to get through. I didn't tell my parents. They'd say it was the house settling or my overactive imagination. That night, I dragged my heavy oak dresser in front of the door before going to bed. It made me feel marginally safer. For a few nights, there was nothing. The silence returned, and I started to believe maybe it was over. Maybe whatever it was had given up. Then came the storm. Thunder rattled the old farmhouse, and lightning lit up the fields in stark, terrifying flashes. I was reading with a lamp on when I heard it, even over the storm. A loud, splintering crack. I froze, my eyes darting to the dresser. It shuddered. Another crack, and the dresser lurched forward an inch. My scream was swallowed by a clap of thunder. Whatever was on the other side was no longer scraping. It was breaking its way in. Panic seized me. I scrambled out of my bed, backing away until my back hit the opposite wall. The dresser moved again, scraping horribly against the floorboards. The gap between it and the wall was widening. In the flashes of lightning, I could see the small door behind it, splintered around the lock. slowly inching open. A dark, narrow void was appearing. I didn't wait to see what would come out. I ran. I flew down the stairs, screaming for my parents, who met me at the bottom, their faces a mixture of confusion and alarm. I just pointed up, unable to form words, sobbing uncontrollably. My dad, ever the pragmatist, grabbed a heavy iron fireplace poker and went up to investigate. I stayed huddled with my mom, my entire body trembling. We heard him moving around, the sound of him dragging the dresser back into place. Then, an unnerving silence. He was up there for what felt like an eternity before he finally came back down, his face pale, his bravado gone. He said the door was smashed open, leading into a dark, dusty crawl space that smelled of damp earth and decay. But it was empty. There was no one there, no animal, no person. We called the police, who found nothing. No signs of a break-in, no footprints outside. They treated us like we were crazy. The next day, my dad boarded up the door with thick planks of wood and half a box of nails. We never heard the scraping again. We sold the house 6 months later. I never slept in that room again. And to this day, I can't stand the sound of scratching, because sometimes when I'm in that hazy space between waking and sleeping, I can still see that small door splintering open, and I wonder what would have happened if I had stayed to see what was so desperate to get out. Working the midnight shift at a 24-hour roadside diner in rural Oregon was usually a mind-numbing exercise in brewing coffee and wiping down sticky tables. The place was called The Beacon, a lonely island of fluorescent light in a sea of dark pine forests and winding, empty highways. My only company was the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional long-haul trucker looking for a greasy meal and a place to rest his eyes. I'd been doing it for about a year and thought I'd seen every kind of weirdo the night had to offer. I was wrong. It was a Tuesday around 2 a.m. The rain was coming down in sheets, making the empty highway outside glisten under the diner's neon sign. I was in the back, restocking napkins, when the bell above the door chimed. I walked out, wiping my hands on my apron, ready with my usual tired greeting. But the words died in my throat. The man standing there was Doff. He was tall and gaunt, dressed in a soggy, old-fashioned suit that looked like it had been buried and dug back up. His skin was pale, almost translucent, and stretched tight over his sharp cheekbones. But it was his smile that truly unnerved me. It was too wide, filled with too many teeth, and it didn't reach his eyes. His eyes were dark, flat voids that seemed to swallow the light. He didn't walk to a booth. He glided. His movements were unnaturally smooth as he slid into the corner booth, the one with the cracked vinyl that nobody ever sat in. He just sat there, staring at me with that fixed, predatory smile. "Coffee?" I finally managed to ask, my voice trembling slightly. He didn't respond. He just kept staring, his head tilted at a slight angle. The silence stretched, thick and heavy, broken only by the drumming of the rain. I felt a primal fear creeping up my spine, a voice screaming at me to run, to lock myself in the back, to call the police. But I was frozen, pinned by his unwavering gaze. Finally, he spoke. His voice was a dry, rasping whisper like dead leaves skittering across pavement. "I'm waiting for a friend," he said, the smile never faltering. "They'll be along shortly." I just nodded, my mouth too dry to speak. I retreated behind the counter, trying to look busy, my eyes darting towards him every few seconds. He didn't move a muscle. He just sat there, smiling, watching me. An hour passed. No one else came in. No car pulled into the lot. It was just me and him. The atmosphere in the diner had become toxic, charged with a silent, menacing energy. I decided I'd had enough. My hand was shaking as I reached for the phone to call the sheriff. As my fingers brushed against the receiver, the man spoke again, his whisper cutting through the diner like a razor. I wouldn't do that. I hadn't made a sound. How could he have known? I looked up, and my heart stopped. He was no longer in the booth. He was standing directly in front of the counter, mere inches away from me. I hadn't seen him move. I hadn't heard a thing. His smile widened, stretching impossibly. "My friend is almost here," he rasped, and a foul, sickly sweet smell, like rotting flowers, washed over me. I stumbled back, my breath catching in a sob. I could see his eyes clearly now. They weren't just dark, they were empty. Utterly, terrifyingly empty. Just then, the headlights of a truck sliced through the rain-streaked windows, sweeping across the diner. The man flinched, his smile faltering for a fraction of a second. He turned his head slowly towards the sound, and in that moment, I saw my chance. I bolted for the back room, slammed the heavy door shut, and fumbled with the deadbolt. I heard a loud hiss from the other side, a sound of pure, frustrated rage, then silence. I stayed in that back room, huddled in the dark until the sun came up. The trucker who had pulled in found me there, a crying, incoherent mess. The diner was empty. There was no sign of the man in the suit. The only thing out of place was the corner booth. A fine layer of what looked like grave dirt covered the cracked vinyl seat where he had been sitting. The police report chalked it up to a prank or a drifter trying to spook me. But I know what I saw. I quit that day. I can still see his face in my nightmares. That terrible wide smile and those black, empty eyes. I don't know who or what he was. And I don't know who his friend was. But I know with every fiber of my being that if that truck hadn't pulled in when it did, I would have found out. My boyfriend Mike and I loved urban exploration. We'd spend our weekends breaking into abandoned buildings, documenting the decay with our cameras. It was a thrill, stepping into places that time had forgotten. Our biggest target was the old St. Vincent's Psychiatric Hospital, a massive, Gothic monstrosity on the outskirts of town that had been shut down in the 70s after rumors of patient abuse. It was fenced off and patrolled, but we'd been planning our way in for months. We chose a moonless night, cutting a hole in the chain-link fence and slipping onto the overgrown grounds. The building loomed over us, a silhouette of jagged rooftops and black, empty windows against the starless sky. The air was heavy with the smell of damp brick and rot. We found our entry point, a boarded-up window in the basement that we managed to pry open. The moment we crawled inside, the temperature dropped. The darkness was absolute, a physical presence that pressed in on us. Our flashlight beams cut through the gloom, revealing a long, tiled hallway. The paint was peeling in long strips, and abandoned wheelchairs sat like skeletal sentinels along the walls. The silence was profound. Our footsteps echoed unnaturally, the only sound in the dead building. We made our way through the ground floor, exploring the old common rooms and offices. It was creepy, but nothing more than we expected. The real prize was the patient wards on the upper floors. As we ascended the main staircase, a faint, rhythmic sound began to drift down from above. Thump, thump, thump. It was slow, heavy, like someone dropping a basketball from a great height over and over. Security? Mike whispered, his voice tight. I shook my head. The patrol car circles the perimeter. They never come inside. The sound was coming from the top floor, the children's ward. Of course it was. Our curiosity outweighed our fear. We continued up, our flashlight beams dancing nervously ahead. The thumping grew louder, more defined, echoing through the empty halls. When we reached the 4th floor, the source was clear. It was coming from the end of the main corridor, from inside the ward's playroom. The double doors were slightly ajar. The sound was deafening now. Thump, thump, thump. It felt like it was vibrating through the floor, through the soles of our shoes. We crept closer, peering through the crack in the doors. The playroom was a large, circular room. In the center, a single red rubber ball was bouncing on its own. It would rise about 10 feet into the air, hang there for a second, and then drop to the floor with a heavy thump before launching itself back up again. There was no one there, no strings, no trick of the light. It was just bouncing. My blood ran cold. This wasn't a prank. This was something else. Let's go, I whispered, pulling on Mike's arm. Now. But he was mesmerized, his camera already up, snapping pictures. This is incredible, he breathed. Then he did something stupid. He pushed the door open and stepped inside. The moment he crossed the threshold, the ball stopped. It just fell to the floor and lay there motionless. The sudden silence was more terrifying than the noise had been. Mike, get out! I hissed from the doorway, refusing to enter. He didn't listen. He walked slowly towards the ball, his camera clicking away. He bent down to pick it up. As his fingers brushed against the rubber, a sound came from directly above us. A low, guttural growl. We both froze. Slowly, instinctively, we tilted our heads back. Our flashlight beams followed. On the ceiling, clinging to the plaster like a giant spider, was a thing. It was long and emaciated, its limbs bent at impossible angles. Its skin was the color of old parchment, and it had no face, just a smooth, blank surface. But we knew it was looking at us. The growl intensified, a wet, rattling sound that vibrated in my chest. Then it dropped. It didn't fall. It launched itself from the ceiling, landing silently between Mike and the door. It unfolded itself, rising to a height of at least 7 feet. It blocked my path to him and his path to me. I screamed, a raw, terrified sound that was swallowed by the cavernous room. Mike scrambled backward, tripping over an overturned toy box. The creature took a step toward him, its long, spindly arm reaching out. I didn't think. I just ran. I turned and fled, not daring to look back. I heard Mike scream my name, a sound that was cut short by a sickening wet crunch. I didn't stop. I clattered down the stairs, burst out of the basement window, and ran through the grounds, the sounds of my own sobbing loud in my ears. I didn't stop running until the flashing lights of a passing car illuminated my street. They found Mike's camera in the playroom the next day. The last picture was a blurry, overexposed shot of the ceiling. The police said he must have fallen and hit his head, but he wasn't in the hospital. He wasn't anywhere. They never found his body. I know what happened to him, and I know that thing is still in there. Sometimes when I close my eyes, I see it unfolding from the ceiling. I can still hear that growl, and I know I was lucky. All I did was look up. Mike was the one who went inside.